Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Northern Soul Reaper and today I'm going to be looking at volume 4 of So I'm a Spider, So What? Now before we get into the review, if you've been keeping up with the videos lately, you probably noticed that there's something a little bit different. I'll give you a moment. Yep, you got it. I've moved some of the books on my shelf around. So let's get into the review. Now, as with my other reviews for this series, I will be going into some minor plot points and referencing some things that happened in previous volumes, so this is just a little bit of a spoiler warning, but I will try to keep these as light as possible. If this were a game, it would get scathing reviews for being too hard. It's like if the final boss spawned right as you were entering the first real area. This is how our spider feels at the beginning of this volume. She's finally made it out of the Great Elrow dungeon, finally into the outside world, after months, years, who knows how long of struggling with all of the creatures in there trying to kill her, everything in that dungeon trying to kill her, up against all the odds. She's finally made it to the outside world. But it's not as easy as that. For all she's outside, she cannot escape her mother. The Queen Taratect is hot on her tail. This volume sees our spider venturing out, taking those tentative first steps into the outside world and discovering that she can't quite escape her mother and coming up with ways to try and escape and get around the mental kin control that the spider seems to have over her. As the Queen Taratect spawn, it seems like there's some control being placed over our spider. It was really fun to see the spider in the outside world and getting to experience this new world, and I really liked the chase elements that came about from the Queen Taratect and also some other elements that come into play later. Our spider always seems to be running away from something or having to deal with some issue, and this volume is no different, and I really like the situations that the spider found herself in. It was really fun to read. So our spider wants to eventually evolve into an arachne. She thinks that growing a human portion of her body will allow her to communicate with other people. She might have to learn another language because this world doesn't seem to speak Japanese, but at least she'll have the means to communicate. So her goals are as thus: 1, to eat lots of delicious food, which she's always wanted since the beginning; 2, to level up lots; and 3, to evolve into an arachne. If only it were that simple. This volume sees her going up against her mother and all of her nightmarish underlings, and I really enjoyed the spider chapters in this volume. The pace was great, lots of different things happened to her. We get a lot of reveals via the administrator characters in this one. We get some confirmations about timelines, which I'll not spoil too much of, but we do kind of get confirmation that the Shun chapters and the other reincarnations are happening at a different point in time to the spider chapters. Because if you think about a spider's development, they grow a lot quicker than human babies, so while our spider character was growing stronger and leveling up, she had a bit of a head start. The other reincarnations were just babies, so they were just starting out. And that's really fun to find out and finally have it confirmed. It's something that you've kind of been in your head when you're reading the previous volumes. You are starting to put things together and realise that this probably is happening at separate times, but this volume in particular gives us a hard, concrete answer about the timelines. And we got a lot of different confirmations about different things in the world, like the skills and the nature of them and why they are there. And it's really interesting. It's a very convoluted series of answers that come at us, but we are starting to get answers in this volume, and it's really fun to read them. So I really like the spider chapters in this one in particular and where she ends up. She ends up in a very interesting predicament by the end that had me desperate to read the next volume. So what about the other characters? Well, Shun and his party are getting ready to enter the Great Elrow dungeon. They are wanting to travel through in order to reach the city of the elves because Hugo and his army are marching on it to try and destroy it. And they are gearing up to enter the dungeon. But what I really liked is Shun has the weight of the world on his shoulders as the hero, but it's the series and the chapters still make time for the lighter moments. There's a particular moment where Faye transforms from a dragon into something else, and we get a bit of a comedic moment there, and there's a lot of comedy between Katya and Shun and all the other characters as this romance subplot develops further. Katya's starting to realise her feelings for Shun, but Shun's a little bit oblivious. I like that we still get these lighter moments in the heavier chapters. It was also really fun in this volume to see some returning characters in the form of one of the dungeon guides. He guides the characters through the dungeon, but he's also someone that we've met previously in a Spider chapter. It's just another example of how this book brings certain perspectives, for, certain events from one perspective, and then much later on you get to see the aftermath or the interpretation of that event from another perspective. It's just a really cool way of messing with us, and I like the way that it messes with time in particular, and we get to see one thing that happens with the spider, and then months or years later it's referenced again by another character who was there or who heard something. It's just a really great storytelling mechanic. It creates a lot of intrigue and it does confuse at times, but when you put the pieces together it's very satisfying to have those answers. There's a lot of great character development in this particular volume. What I really enjoyed was some chapters have an event occur, and then the next chapter there's an interlude and we get to see another character who was there and they're alone with their thoughts, and you get to see their inner motives. So we get to see the real way that people are thinking and interpreting particular events. So you might think that one character is very trustworthy from one moment, and then the inner thoughts reveal that they might be considering betraying someone, or they've got a completely different motive for doing what they're doing. The elves in particular have very strange motives. On one side they're sheltering the reincarnations and helping them, but they seem to be doing so and for their own particular means and motives, and it's not quite clear what they are. We get a lot of those answers in this volume, and it's really fun to find out what happens. This volume leaves the reincarnations on the eve of war. They meet up with some other characters in the elf village ready for Hugo's assault, but that's where it kind of ends. A lot of Shun's chapters with Katia and Miss Oka and all of the other characters, a lot of this volume is in the Great Elro dungeon, and it's really fun to see them going through the dungeon years later after the spider has left, and to see the aftermath of what we are actually reading about in the spider's chapters. It's quite funny to see those two things like almost side by side. As with previous volumes, there's a lot of mystery and threads left to be unravelled in future installments, but I feel like this is the volume where we get a lot of answers and a lot of things fall into place. It was fun in previous volumes thinking, is that character, or is that reference to that thing there? And we get a lot of reveals and confirmations in this volume. It might not be what we were expecting. There are some surprises. I thought that I had things worked out based on previous chapters, and I was totally wrong about what I was assuming, or who I was assuming was who. What I really liked was where the characters end up in this volume. Both sides of the coin, we have the spider and the reincarnations, are in a very interesting place. The story's moved along really well for them, with a lot of character development, especially the inner monologues of the different characters, their inner thoughts. And I like the way that the spider is being portrayed, and you can see her divergent personalities and kind of how her thought processes is very much changing in this world. And that's true for some other characters as well. Katya in particular is almost left her former self completely behind. She no longer refers to herself as in her previous reincarnation, her previous form. She feels she is Katya, a completely new person. That's where a lot of these misunderstandings and comedic moments from the romance, the subplot, comes from as well. I really enjoyed this volume, and where the characters are left, I immediately jumped into volume 5 and started reading. I had to find out more. I had to progress this story. The spider's story, her final chapter in particular, is left on such a cliffhanger that I just had to read. I almost just basically put volume 4 on the shelf and picked up volume 5. It was really interesting, and I couldn't wait to find out what happened. So that's pretty much it for this review. I really enjoyed volume 4 of So I'm a Spider, So What. I loved where the characters ended up, and I loved the developments that we got for the different characters. This series does a really great job of letting you put some pieces together, and you kind of feel clever and like, puzzling out from previous volumes the clues that were left and like getting things right. But a lot of the time it completely goes in the opposite direction to what you were thinking. You might have had one particular thought on a character or an event, and it just goes in the opposite direction. It's really good at subverting your expectations and just completely running counter to what you were thinking. This is a great series. It continues to be a fantastic series. I cannot wait to get stuck into more of the volumes. I've read volume 5, and I've got 6 is currently being read, and then I've got volume 7 to read as well, and then it's just volume 8 and I'm caught up. There's a lot going on in this series, especially in volume 5, so stay tuned for my review of that. Cannot wait to get the review done for that one as well. If you've read the previous volumes, then I just recommend that you pick this one up and give it a read. It just continues to be a fantastic, fantastic series. This blows all of the other isekai out the water, in my opinion. It just continues to take those typical things that happen, or typical elements from a lot of isekai, and just completely turn them on their head, and it presents them and changes them in very interesting ways. So I'm a Spider, So What? Volume 4, definitely worth your time. If you're already invested in the series, I would definitely recommend giving it a go. So that's pretty much it for today's review. If you liked it, remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. That's the best way to get the videos as and when they come out. It's a great way to support the channel as well. Let me know in the comments below if you've read volume 4 and what stood out in this volume in particular for you. Let me know what you thought of it so far, and let me know what you think of the series so far. Also, let me know who your favourite character is. It's a good one. I always like to know who people's favourite characters is. I don't think I've decided on one yet. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram. Let me know what you think of the series there, or follow me to find out what I'm reading that particular day, or you can always look at pictures of my cats. There's plenty of those on there as well. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Northern Soul Reaper, and until next time, goodbye.